Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more slug testing, and today we've got another really interesting combination to run. We've run this shotgun with these shells before, but a slightly different variation of the shells. We saw some decent results from them, but now we've got this other variation, and there's the real possibility we see some very impressive results here. This gun, for being a slug gun, has been super impressive so far across the board, and we know these type of slugs can definitely hold up their end of the bargain as well, so we'll see how they do overall. But as for the shells we've got today, I brought out some of these Brenneke Red Magic Sabot slugs. They are a 12 gauge, 3-inch, 1-ounce slug, and the back of the box says 1756 here for the muzzle velocity. It also says 432 grains is an ounce, which that's not correct. 1 ounce is 437.5, but we'll give Brenneke the benefit of the doubt. When we look at our chrono numbers and calculate energy later on, we'll use the 432 grain claim that they say here as well. It also says a 3-inch 5-shot group at 100 yards. We'll see how close that claim is, because Brennekes are usually in the ballpark for the vast majority of different tests we've done with them anyway. And like I mentioned a minute ago, we have tried the Red Magics a couple times. They've always been the 2 3/4 inch versions, so now we've got these 3-inch ones, and we'll see how they shoot. As for the setup we're putting them through, I brought out the Savage 212. This is a bolt action 12 gauge shotgun. I've got a Vortex Crossfire HD 3 to 9x40 on top. Got a 22-inch fully rifled barrel, and for all intents and purposes, this is a straight up bolt action rifle, but chambered for a shotgun shell. It's shown us plenty of very impressive accuracy results. I mean, we've gotten several MOA or better 100-yard groups out of this gun with slugs. So we'll see how it likes these 3-inch Red Magics. The 2 3/4 did decent through it from what I can remember. So now it's up to the 3-inch, and we'll see how they do. So as for our test today, we're running it the same as we usually do. I don't have very many of these slugs to work with. Got about a box and a half of them. So we have to make do with what we have and make the best of it. So we're going to shoot our typical 2 groups, one at 50 yards and another at 100 yards. Each group is going to be 3 shots, and I will give the barrel about 10 minutes to cool down in the shade between each of our groups. So barrel heat should hopefully not be too much of an issue for us today. And of course, I got the chrono as well to get our velocities, and we can calculate some energy numbers and stuff off of that as well. So let's get you guys to view those targets. We'll start at 50, then move out to 100, and we'll see what the 3-inch Brenneke Red Magics can do through the 212. I've got good hopes. I bet they're going to be pretty stout in the recoil department as well, but let's take some shots and see just how good we actually get. And I will jump in here and voice over real quick and apologize for the target cameras being a little bit blurry. I don't know why my camera had whatever settings it had the day I filmed some of these slug tests, but we'll get closer looks at them here in just a second anyway. And I will have that fixed for future testing for sure. Okay, so now we'll take a quick look at our chrono numbers before we go look at our target, because I think things got pretty interesting downrange. We have a boss claim of 1756 for those shells. We have a 22-inch barrel, and I believe we were bouncing kind of all over their claim. We had a high of 1770, a low of 1699. That gave us an average of 1739. So what is that, like 17 feet per second below their boss claim? I'd say we're in the ballpark of what we should be seeing for sure, with an extreme spread of 71 and a standard deviation of 23. So at an average of 1739, here is your muzzle energy for their claimed 432 grains. Technically, it's a little less than an ounce if that number is accurate, but obviously at over 1700 feet per second, 432 grains worth of lead flying down range is a stout payload that's carrying plenty enough energy to do the job for whatever you'd want to use these slugs for. But let's go check out our targets, because I think things got a little interesting the farther range we push these to. All right, so here we have both of our targets. A little bit of a jank setup. I'm still in the process of getting a new design target instead of that cardboard stuff for 50-yard testing, but we can still see what we need to see here. Ignore these bullet holes over here on the very far left edge. That is from a different test on this other target over here. What we're looking at is our 50-yard group right here and our 100-yard group right up here. And we definitely see some rather interesting results here. We'll start at 50 yards, that being these bullet holes right here. It's a little deceiving, but all three of our bullet holes just drew one line in the paper right here. This little mark you see up here is one of the sabots, which we'll look at here in a minute because I think that is where our results are really going to show themselves as for what happened here as we started pushing these to farther ranges. But these three shots at 50 yards, all of them are overlapping each other, created one long oblong hole in the paper. Perfectly fine for a 50-yard hunt, that's for sure. To the best that I was able to measure from center to center on the farthest two bullet holes across, we're right at 1 inch at 50 yards. So not bad there. We're overlapping shots and that would certainly work. But moving over to our 100-yard target, however, I was aiming for this red dot here. Obviously, we were hitting noticeably high with those shells. That is not the round I'm zeroed with, and it's moving a good little bit faster than the load I'm zeroed with as well. So being high doesn't overly surprise me, especially from this setup. It has been very picky. If you change the loads, you're going to be hitting high or low or wherever the case is. So if you got one of these 212s, zero with the load you're planning on hunting with, because your point of impact will change. Now it looks like we have two bullet holes up here with this little mark over here on the right. What happened was this top bullet hole was our first shot, then our second was right here at the bottom, and our third was also pretty much overlapping right here. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but in person this is two bullet holes. It's another oblong hole, and we definitely hit two in the same hole pretty much there. But then there's this little mark down here. That is not a bullet hole. That is from one of the little base wad pieces that's pressed into the back of those slugs, which I guess could also be what this mark is over here on the left as well at 50 yards.
And for some reason, I didn't actually show the measurement of that group when I was out there actively filming, but I did measure it and take a picture after the fact. Those three shots are right at 4.14 inches, and you can see now that leftward bullet hole is actually two slugs pretty much overlapping each other compared to the right bullet hole. So a little over 4 inches, not terrible, but maybe a little inconsistent.
But what is starting to happen is the farther range we push it to, we're starting to get a little bit of sporadic jumpiness coming into play. Obviously, this is not a scientific test. It's not perfect, just having three shots in two groups. But if we would have continued taking shots, we would have started chasing our tail all over the place. We got real lucky that we had two in the same hole here. I think that's the ideal accuracy, is pretty much two in the same hole or touching. But then we're going to start having these jumps. And that's because the petals on the sabots are really getting torn up. Some of them are fine, some of them are not, and I have started to find the little tail wad pieces that are pressed into the back of the slugs strung along the range here at longer ranges. So what's happening is the farther we go past 50 yards, the sabots are already performing inconsistent, and now that little tail wad piece is coming out of the back of the slug. That is going to mess with your stabilization, and that's going to make you start chasing your tail. You'll get a couple that work the way they're supposed to, and then you'll throw one randomly. So let's look at the sabots and the little tail wad pieces that I found, because that's going to tell our story to where if we would have continued taking shots, it would have continued to kind of bounce all over the place. So first up here we have our mess of sabots. This is not all of them. This is the ones I was just easily able to find. In the center here, we have one that worked out decently well for us. Looks about like I would expect it to. However, you can definitely start to see the beginnings of our issues here. It's starting to try and tear some of the petals off of it, but that is what it's kind of supposed to look like. Then we started moving on to this mess where we were barely keeping some petals on and tearing some other ones off. That's going to do some inconsistent things for sure. And we finally ended up with this, completely torn off all four petals. Not ideal, not exactly what you want in a sabot slug for sure. Maybe a little too thin, a little too soft of a material, something like that. Not something we've typically seen with the Red Magics, I don't believe. So that is definitely the beginnings of our jumping at longer ranges for sure. But here is where the real problem started, I believe, for our 100-yard grouping. These are the little tail wad pieces that are pressed into the back of the slugs. These are supposed to stay with the slug as it flies down range. If you lose these, especially off of a Brenneke slug, they really start to wander and the stability just isn't quite there for them. I only found two. There could be more, or we could have just had two that didn't quite play ball. But either way, this is not supposed to happen. And this is why I said if we continued taking our shots, we would have really exposed how much it was jumping all over the place. And we got lucky enough as we did to have two that are pretty much in the same hole at 100. So not something I would trust as of now, past about 50 yards or so. At that range, it really doesn't seem to make a difference, but at longer ranges past 50, this type of stuff will absolutely come into play, and it could ruin your day if it happens on the shot that really counts. So don't love to see this type of stuff happening. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about those results right there? Obviously, it's not a perfect test. We definitely saw some hit and miss results. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm working with an extremely limited amount of these shells. I only have one left currently, and I want to save that for maybe some potential ballistic gel testing at some point soon. So we had to work with what I had for today anyway, but I still think we can get an idea on what's going on here. At 50 yards, we're cutting big diagonal holes in the paper with our groups, so you're stacking them right where you should be there. However, once you push it farther past 50 yards, that's where the sabot starting to come apart really comes into play, and especially that little tail wad piece coming out of the back of the slugs. If you start losing your stability with these Brenneke slugs, you'll start wandering shots way off in no man's land pretty quickly. So definitely don't love that that's happening for sure. I think if we would have continued to take another shot or two, we would have really seen them start jumping out as well. It seems like if they work as designed or as intended, we can stack them pretty much on top of each other decently well from what we saw at 100 yards here. But if you get one that doesn't work, you throw it out kind of in no man's land a little bit. So for me, if I'm hunting with this combo, 50 yards, maybe 60 yards or so, that way if you get some sort of failure in the sabot or the tail wad, your groups are still right down there where you need them to be. But ideally, this should not be happening, and we've definitely seen way better from that gun for sure with other slugs. So a little bit surprising, but there have been a couple Brenneke loadings that have been a little hit or miss over the last couple years. I don't know if they've changed some of the formulas with them a little bit or something recently, but not exactly the consistency that I'd like to see out of them. But that's why we test different things and see what happens, because sometimes it'll surprise you with how good it is, or you'll figure out some issues like this that could potentially be happening. So let me know all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Brenneke Red Magic slugs? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Is that a combo or a result you would actually reliably hunt with? Would you keep it to 50, 60 yards or so? Would you feel okay still pushing it to 100 yards if this type of stuff is happening in your setup as well? Or would you probably just go to a little bit different slug where you're not seeing a little bit of inconsistencies like this? And what other combos do you want to see us run with different slugs being put through that 212? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All the information will be in the description if you're interested in it. But I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.